Well, it will be interesting to see that. Now, in Iowa, there's a new poll out saying that Rand Paul might do okay, or at least his platform is doing okay. You see the Newsmax.com article on what our friend Brother Tancredo used to say. But let's go straight to the source.
Let's do it.
For more on the story, it's time to bring in Steve Deace. He is an expert on Iowa politics, master organizer, master moderator, great talk show host, and noted author of the book Rules for Patriots, How Conservatives Can Win Again. Steve checks in from Des Moines, where I guess later today he hosts a forum. And of course, as mentioned earlier, Larry Elder is standing by to contribute to the conversation from Newsmax LA. So Steve, before we get to the forum you're going to host later today and who all's involved there, what about the Pauline equation, the Rand Paul approach to winning this thing? Does it in fact, does his philosophy in fact appeal to Iowans?
Rand Paul has actually lost a considerable amount of support within the Iowa conservative grassroots over the last year and a half. He's going to have to rebuild his father's organization. They've lost already a few key people within the Liberty Movement to Ted Cruz. In fact, the founder of the Iowa Liberty Movement, Drew Ivers, isn't even supporting Rand, thinks he's drifted too far away from his father's positions. And I think before we start talking about next year and general elections, because JD, you know, a lot of things could change between now and then. General elections a lot of times can be decided by what is the price of gas, what's the real unemployment rate, an unforeseen gaffe. It's a little bit like the NCAA tournament. Before you worry about winning the Final Four, you got to win that first sub-regional. And right now, all that really matters is what primary voters in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina think. And when you're looking at Rand Paul, the biggest problem he has is something that Tom Tancredo touched on in the clip that you played. It's trying to figure out, how do I hold on to my father's libertarian base while realizing while it's deep in support, it's not very wide. I've got to expand that base. But once I do, and I start getting into issues like immigration, where over the last 2 years, Rand Paul's taken every conceivable position imaginable on that issue, I mean, then you start fraying your coalition a little bit. I think he's got the toughest task of all the candidates in the Republican primary, because it's really not about what people at Howard University think, or what somebody in suburban Chicago thinks, or what the people at Montana think about you. It's about what the people in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina think.
Steve, how is Rand Paul as a politician, as a retail guy, as a guy that does one-on-one stuff? His father had a touch. Does he have the same kind of touch his dad had?
You know, I'll give you an example. The first time I saw him in that setting, Larry, was 2 years ago. There was an event with about 600 pastors here in Iowa, and those are really the kinds of events that determine who wins Iowa caucuses. And Rand Paul was supposed to be the main event, and Ted Cruz was the undercard. And Ted Cruz came in, commanded the stage, owned it, spoke without a teleprompter, no notes, even did a 30-minute ad hoc Q&A on every topic imaginable, and just owned that room. Rand came in, you know, a little bit short in stature, spoke from a teleprompter, didn't really take any questions. I think he's got a long way to go where that is concerned, and I think that is a huge thing in states like Iowa and South Carolina, where there's not major TV centers that you just drop 5 or 10 million and buy a primary with TV ads. You've got to do a lot of retail politics, and I think that's an area that he still needs a lot of work.
Steve, so if you were advising Paul, what would you be suggesting that he needs to do differently or in the coming months?
You know, we have a another local talk show host here in Des Moines named Robert Reese, who put it very well. I want to give him a plug since I'm using his line. You know, you look at a lot of these candidates, and what happens is their record doesn't match their rhetoric. In Rand's case, his rhetoric doesn't match his record. You know, I work for Conservative Review, which scouts and you know, vets all these conservatives in Congress and across the country. He's got the third highest score, other than Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, on our scorecard right now. But if you watch the speech that he gave where he announced the other day, he seemed to pander to every group other than the conservatives who will actually vote in primaries. He didn't mention Obamacare, didn't mention amnesty, didn't mention life, didn't mention religious freedom, which is a battle that's been raging the last 10 or 11 days in the country. So I think his people have, before they start making a broad general election argument, the likes of which we typically see from candidates like Jeb Bush, they've got to win over the hearts and minds of the people who vote first, and those are primary voters.
About a minute 30 remains. You guys gear up for that first in the nation caucus, a little different from a primary, and today you're moderating a forum. Tell us what you've got going on later on today, Steve.
We think it's going to be the first time a joint forum has ever been held with the 2016 candidates. We have 4 of them. It's going to be a large gathering of Iowa's considerable homeschool population. Well over 1,000 Iowa activists will be there to watch Cruz, Jindal, Santorum, and Huckabee. We did invite Rand. He did not take us up on our invitation, in case you were going to ask that next. And I think this is a key group, because these are a lot of your worker bees in an Iowa caucus that help you develop that organization. If someone can win that group over today, that gives you a leg up organizationally in Iowa.
Steve, on the other side of the aisle, how concerned should Hillary Rodham Clinton be?
Very. I mean, if you look at her personal numbers, people don't like her and they don't trust her. Other than that, she's in great shape, Larry. I mean, at this point, I think that unless the Republicans, essentially be Republicans again, and are bound and determined to nominate a candidate that wants to go to war with their own base, if they decide to do that, they will lose. If they don't, they're going to beat her next year, I believe.
Are you speaking for everyone, or are you talking about Republicans don't like her? Because there are a lot of Democrats
I think
that
the majority
love
of the
Hillary.
American people, if I'm looking at the Quinnipiac polls, I don't really care about names. I mean, names can change. I'm really looking at what people think of a known commodity like Hillary Clinton, who's been on a national stage for well over 20 years now. And the problem with those numbers is when you're so well known, there's really no way to move them. There's no way to really reinvent yourself without having your own sincerity as a human being called into question. So essentially what you're looking at with Hillary is everything you didn't like about Bill Clinton and none of the things that you did.
All right, Steve Deace, a succinct billing of what challenges the former First Lady and former Secretary of State and former Senator has. Yep, thanks very much for that. Now time for a Newsmax National Weather Update with Jessica Reyes.